All right. Jen, would you mind taking it away this morning so I can concentrate on?
Certainly. So good morning, folks. It's good to see people coming into the meeting. You all are muted and your cameras are off. Staying muted would be great unless you have a question. You are totally welcome to turn your camera on and join us if you would like. So welcome to the today's session in the housing series. Oh my word, I hate to say this, but I just lost the actual title of it.
Housing characteristics.
Thank you. I'm looking at the wrong thing. So thank you for joining us for this workshop. Is this number 4? I'm sorry, I'm so unprepared this morning. I thought I knew what I was going to come in and talk about. So anyway, welcome to the workshop. Good to see you all here. This is part of this workshop series, masterclass series put on by the Maine Community Development Association. I'm Jen Peters, Director of Community Development for Sunrise County Economic Council, and soon to be past president of MCDA. So the annual meeting is coming up on Friday. We'll be meeting in Belfast, and then moving on to Steersport to visit the Zero Energy Home demonstration home there. Any MCDA members are totally welcome to join us at the meeting. The MCDA meeting, you just need to reserve it or let us know you're coming in advance, register in advance because food will be provided. Anyone is welcome to attend the Zero Energy Home Tour. Searsport, something like 14 Osprey Avenue. I'll have to take a look back to see what it is exactly. That will be at 1:30. So today's presenter is Kristen Henry. She is the Director of Community and Economic Development for the town of Madawaska, and and the incoming president for the Maine Community Development Association. So Kristen, take it away, please.
Perfect. Thank you.
Kristen, you just muted.
Hang on, Kristen, let me try to fix this.
It popped up a window that said unmute, so I clicked it, but what you muted and immediately a window popped up that said unmute. I did click that. Oh, try now. There.
Can we hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for attending this meeting, this masterclass series today. All right, so give me just a moment to share my screen here. It'll take me a second to, let's see. Well, that's not what I wanted. I'm sorry, bear with me just a moment. This worked perfectly before everybody was in the room.
You know, that's what happens, and you know exactly what you're looking at before everybody's in the room as well.
Really? Yeah, no, it is for sure. Okay, so now share. And then I have to do a thing. Okay, perfect. And Hope and Jen are going to be my eyes and ears this morning as I go through this. So if you have any questions, reach out to they'll take care of that for you. All right, good morning everybody, and welcome to the Housing Characteristics Masterclass this morning. As Jen mentioned, I'm Kristen Henry, formerly with NMDC. I've transitioned to the town of Madawaska as the Economic and Community Development Director. So for those of you who have seen me in that role, I just wanted to let you know that I have now completely transitioned over. I'll be leading today's session. This workshop is designed to give you practical tools to make better housing decisions within your community. We're going to look at why housing decisions and housing characteristics matter, making sure that we're linking design choices to households, incomes, jobs, and market demand. We're going to walk through each step of the process, or most of the steps. We're going to define the problem. We're going to target the households. We're going to set unit mix, choosing building methods, want to look at planning for financial feasibility and risks. Throughout the class, we'll not only discuss strategies, but also work hands-on with a case study towards the end of this. it's a pretty interesting case study. It'll be my first time facilitating something like that. So I hope you guys bear with me on that as we learn together. By the end of today, I'm hoping that you're going to come away with a stronger framework for evaluating housing projects within your own community. I'm hoping that this is more than just a theory, that we're able to give you some tools to take back to your communities. All right, so every housing project really needs to balance multiple forces: households, incomes, jobs, market demand. There are a plethora of forces that will come together to help shape your decisions. The right choices are going to improve approvals, they're going to stabilize your financing, and they're also going to ensure that the project serves the intended community. We want to be intentional here. So often we see communities or developments that maybe miss the mark on being intentional. And unfortunately, what that can do is that can affect the outcomes. Think of housing characteristics as kind of those levers that when you set them in just the right way, they can unlock both the feasibility and the impact for the community. So I do want to ask, and I'm trying to be as engaging as possible throughout this presentation. So, like, in your community, what happens if unit size or pricing is mismatched to local wages? Does that happen in any of your communities? And once again, I can't see anybody, so I'll leave it to Hope to let me know whether there are responses here. Like, if we take a look at if you have all community members who are in extremely low income bracket, does it make sense to have market rate houses at 15 units at $15 or $2,000 a month? Do we see that in your communities?
So can folks come off mute?
There is a feature for that. Unfortunately, I no longer have access to that, but you should be able to.
Elaine says yes.
Excellent, Elaine. Is there a particular difference or mismatch that you see in your community?
Yeah, so I'm in Washington County, and there was new construction for housing, and it was kind of billed as workforce housing, but the rents start at like $2,000 a month. And so in this region, that's great. In a lot of communities in Washington County, the households are housing burdened to begin with. So when rents are starting at 2,000, and the community that I live in, and surrounding communities, to get a 1-bedroom apartment in coastal communities, thousands of dollars a month if they're available.
Right. And what was that impact? Did we find that those people were choosing to go to different communities to find more affordable housing? Did it bring in people who were not necessarily looking for a workforce, but were looking for the higher market rates?
I think a lot of them wound up becoming, how do they term that without vacation housing?
Gotcha. Okay.
Particularly in the coastal communities where I live.
Okay.
A lot of
so because of that mismatch, really what happened was we didn't lose, but we ended up with more seasonal population that was going to those units versus the full-time year-round individuals and workers.
Yeah, I mean, having, speaking with people who own these rental homes, that one homeowner said to me, "Why would I rent for 2,000 a month when I can get 2,000 a week?"
Right. No, that's wonderful. A wonderful example. Not wonderful in that matter, but that's a great example of the mismatch and why we need to do our best to be more intentional. So thank you, Elaine, for that. I appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, let me go back one. All right, so moving on, we want to define the problem and the demand. So we can even go off what Elaine was just talking about. You know, what is the gap, the shortage? Is it shortage, quality, price point, or the general mismatch? Want to take a look at targeting households by income bands, age, work location. And there are a lot of areas, a lot of places that we can find this information. We want to use demand indicators, so vacancy rates, rent levels, job growth, wait lists. Always ground the data with local knowledge. So where I tend to, or some of my go-tos for taking a look at what our AMI, age, work, I do go to mainstatehousingdata.org. That's one of my favorite places. One of the best places to go, and I have that over here. This aggregates the data that you would find on the ACS. So if you've been going to the ACS or Headwaters or you know, any number of other sources, those are all great places to go. This one just gives us a nice clean aggregation of the data. Let me go back here. But we also want to know, if we're looking at gap specifically, the state of Maine has been very active in creating our housing production goals. So for example, based on state methodology, Aroostook County, which is where I'm located, it's recommended that we are creating 2,010 units, new units by 2031. But what does that look like for your community? So during my time with NMDC, I was able to create a housing production needs or goals calculator. This is a very high level view that can assist a community with taking a look at what they need to bring in. So this, so what you're seeing here is just kind of the general, this is dummy information in here. What I did is based on, and if you received our case study information this morning in an email that was sent out, wonderful. If not, get with Hope or Jen to have that forwarded to you. It went to the Maine CDA listserv. But what I did this morning is I put in the community data for the case study that we're going to be going over here soon. This calculator is based on state methodology. If you're interested in finding out more about that, please reach out to Charlotte Nutt. She has a wonderful presentation on how to determine what your community's recommendations are. So this is all information that came out of our case study. I popped it in this morning just to make this kind of quick. Goes over all the regular stuff. Now we're expecting 5% growth. Obviously, you're going to have to determine what that looks like for your community. I just left our 5% standard in here. And then when we calculate this, this tells us that based on unemployment, jobs to home, the current vacancy rate, and 5% growth over 10 years, that this particular community would need to build 1,000 units. Obviously, this is not necessarily accurate for real life purposes here. It breaks down how many single family, multifamily, and how many of those should be affordable, projected housing growth. So once again, this is a very high level look at helping assist a community with defining the specific problem of the gap as it relates to shortage and affordability. Okay, so once we define the problem, so for our case study, we're gonna say that we have a gap in our production. Okay, so once you define the problem, identify who you're solving it for. You have to decide between rental ownership, mixed tenure. Want to break households into income bands by AMI, link them to monthly payment targets, just like in the case that Elaine shared with us. If your income targets are here, but your rental or ownership prices are here, that's not necessarily going to work and bring in the population that you need to sustain the community. You want to consider special groups like seniors, new families, or key sector workers. construction workers, healthcare, other traveling workers as well. Maybe on the coastal communities, it's hospitality workers. So one way to determine, or the best way to determine your income targets by AMI, because most of our programs are going to look at AMI, we tend to use, or we use HUD's area median income as a standard measure. HUD actually updates those each year, makes them available by county. For Maine, you can grab the tables directly on the HUD site or through Maine Housing. So for example, rental housing, rent is often capped. So a household at, X percent of AMI pays no more than 30% of their income. So if 60% AMI for a 3-person household is 45 grand a year, then affordable rent is about 1125 for that family. And we also need to remember that with home ownership as opposed to rentals, the programs are going to set maximum purchase prices or income eligibility based on these AMI bands. So it's important for you to know what those are for your region, your community. Funding programs that use that, for example, would be the Low Income Housing Tax Credit, CDBG, MBRC, USDA. They all use AMI in some form to establish eligibility. So you're going to want to focus on those and know that. An interesting fact that when you're looking at financing and creating that capital stack, and we're using AMI or an LMI type of program, everybody can be different. So for example, CDBG or anything coming down from HUD is going to require 51% of your units to be available for LMI individuals. But if you're stacking and you're using another funding source, such as the FHLB, the Federal Home Loan Bank, they only require 20% of the units to be LMI. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're looking at a stack and you're including those different percentages to get creative with that and make sure that you have the optimal option for that.
So Kristen, just because some folks may not have the acronyms down pat, LMI, low and moderate income?
Yep.
So,
AMI, area median income.
thank you.
Yep. Apologize for that. All right, so let's talk about mix and space real quick. So your unit mix should reflect the household sizes and the market gaps. So if you have a community that has a lot of 2-earner households, you might need more 2-bedroom units. And you want to add universal design and visibility features for inclusivity. Community space should really support your daily life. So take a look at what's in your community. In a small town, especially in rural Maine, we'll look at that. Look there. In a small town with a lot of 2-earner households, you're going to want to lean towards the 2-bedroom. 2-earner households often need either a 2nd bedroom for kids, potentially for a home office, especially if they're working from home. A good balance might be a mix with at least 50% 2-bedroom units supported by some 1-bedrooms for singles, elderly, or couples with kids, maybe a few 3-bedrooms to catch the larger families. Studios or micro units tend to have less demand in rural markets because the lifestyle patterns here, like well, most of Maine is rural, so pretty much everywhere here, they tend to lean towards more space, more storage, more flexibility. Right sizing isn't only about what's the cheapest to build, but will actually rent and stay stable long term. And one of the easiest examples to look at, and this goes back to being intentional in what we're doing, is let's say a community feels that they need to build 100 units to keep up with historic underproduction and future growth. Well, it's cheap and easy to pop in 100 tiny homes. They're wonderful. We love tiny homes. They are in the right space. They can be transformative for a community. But if we're in a rural community where we're trying to attract families to mitigate out-migration, that doesn't necessarily match with what the needs in the community are. Once again, let's go back to, we need to be intentional when we're choosing what our characteristics look like. This is a big one. This also goes hand in hand with just, trying to create things to fill the gap as opposed to looking at what we can actually support. And this happens with a lot of our communities up here in particular, and I'm sure throughout the rest of the state. Our water, sewer capacity, electric services, broadband, well, not even really broadband. These infrastructure pieces are aging. There was a lot of money back in the 80s to kind of throw at all these projects for infrastructure and wastewater systems. And they were meant only at that time to meet the needs of the existing population. And so you want to bring in 20 multi-unit buildings. Do you actually have the capacity for that? Can you do that? If you can't do that, or you're not sure, that has to be addressed first. So once again, just one program that was created through NMDC, and this is available for use with members and can also be shared. This tool here can assist, once again, high view here, but a little more inclusive than the production needs tool that I shared earlier. This will ask you the questions. What is your total water capacity? So we're just going to put in some dummy information here. So 1 million gallons, or it's not a million. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 1 million gallons. Of that, 78% is being utilized. So you're getting really close to capacity with that. Your school, you could have 500, or you have room for 500 kids. You only have about 2 empty seats. So you go through and you put in your information here. And I'm going to put in dummy information so that we can just move through this quickly. And this helps you assess to do critical road condition poor. It can help your community assess where you are, gives you recommendations on what you could focus on. Sorry, I apologize. My multitasking is not always great. All right, so it pops out here. It pulls live data, tells you how many people are in your community. And it says here, in order to accommodate growth, and we can change that, you need to create 332 new school seats. You're not going to have enough water. You're going to be over on that. This is how many housing units you're going to need, timeline, population, water system, you're near capacity, school system, over capacity, broadband system, it's limited. So once you're able to figure out where you are on these infrastructure based areas, you can then determine what you're capable of building and whether you need to focus on your infrastructure first. That's really key to making sure that you can produce these units in your community. Okay, building methods. So we have the age-old question is, what do we build? Modular, site build, adaptive reuse. Do we look at rehabilitation of existing units? What does that look like? It's going to be different for every community. It's going to be based on what your current housing inventory is, your location, what the overall goal for your community is. So right now there is some buzz about modular housing, and even some buzz about mobile homes. They are more affordable than site built or stick built. They can be brought in quicker, especially the further north you go, the shorter our construction season goes. We have many communities have a lack of contractors that are able to come in and do stick built and site built. And so modular is becoming a very popular option right now. Adaptive reuse is sustainable, but there are, cost risks with that. The flip side of adaptive reuse is that there's also a lot of funding out there for it, especially with historic tax credits and being able to syndicate those into capital for the project. So, we want to think about projects in our town or ones that we've seen elsewhere where, modular construction could be beneficial. What phases of a project are most at risk of delay that going to modular could solve, or vice versa? What is the benefit to site built for your community? We want to look at heating source, efficiency, ventilation, energy use, utility costs, backup power. Forecast utility costs and set energy. We want to forecast utility costs and set energy use targets, and that also allows us to be intentional with our housing, going to green energy. That's a very popular option right now. In fact, there is a project, and for some reason I didn't put the link here. Jen, you're going to have to help me out because I can't pull up my data. The housing tour that we were.
Oh, for the zero energy home?
Yes. Sorry. If you can synopsize that real quick.
So do you want the actual link for the site there so people can, do you want me to pop the link for the site into the chat so that people can take a look at it?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
I will grab that. Sorry.
All right. So as Jen's popping that in there into the chat for you to take a look at. That's a wonderful project. They're currently, I guess it's up for sale right now. It's a pilot project. Once again, I apologize. I can't pull up my data.
They're going under contract with it,
Okay.
which is why we needed to set up a tour somewhere around the 1st of October before it does go under contract. So Friday, 1:30, we'll be going through to check it out, just to see what what it actually looks like, what goes into it, how much it costs, what possibilities are for doing this type of thing in other areas of the state as well.
Good deal. So we definitely recommend everybody take a look at that. And that could help drive some of these questions on energy resilience and operating costs. Okay, so financial feasibility. Now we're going to go in. This will be addressed more in depth in some later classes, but it's ideal to put together a very basic pro forma. You want to look at total development costs, sources, uses, stress test rates, rent, schedules, all those things. If that is something that might be outside of your community scope or your development committee or planning board scope, there are people that you can reach out to for assistance with that. One person is John Egan with Genesis. In fact, he will be presenting a class for us here in a few sessions. And people in his space can assist with building a capital stack with both public and private sources, Maine Housing, CDBG, MBRC, USDA, banks, foundations. There are a lot of options with that. And this will give you a baseline to be able to move forward with the type of housing that you want to see. Just some options here. Maine housing programs, low-income housing tax credit, USDA rural development, 515 and 538, TIFs, historic tax credits, SSBCI. Those are all options for public and private partnerships. If you go to the MCDA website, which is mainecda.org, and go to our training tab, we have a lot of really great webinars from our previous information session that address the majority of the things that you're going to see here on the screen of these capital stack options here.
And this is along with the traditional types of financing that John Egan will be talking about. We also have a session that'll be coming up talking about the more non-traditional types of funding that you can go for. So keep that in mind too.
Mm-hmm. And as a side note, to expand on what Jen was just saying, we have a special session with, well, I guess with the non-traditional, specifically with NBRC and CDBG. That presentation, I recommend everybody share and register for that. There's some really creative ways to knock out a lot of those infrastructure issues if your community has needs to address those. You want to know your zoning pathway by rights versus special review, right size parking by using observed car ownership and shared options. You don't want to overbuild asphalt. Yeah, you want to take a look at transit or transit or pedestrian access. What is the how does your current zoning affect the ability to create the housing that your community needs? We want to have, in addition to that, right size parking. With LD 2003 and other ordinance changes, there's been an increase in flexibility when we're looking at parking and transit connections. That's your community, if not already following LD 2003, which everybody is supposed to be, should take a look or could take a look at making zoning more flexible to allow for the type of housing that you want to come into your community. Just a few extra things here that can make your housing more appealing: storage, flexible community room, outdoor play area, ground floor commercial services. I see those as opportunities for senior housing, elderly housing, to make it easier. Okay, so every project is going to face risks. You've got permitting delays, supply chain, interest rates. You want to mitigate that with early design contingencies and probably some parallel bids. You want to track metrics like leasing velocities, rent burden, satisfaction, local impacts. Just discuss these ahead of time. I've only named a few here. Just take a look at anything and everything that could potentially delay or shift your project over. And you want to make sure that you have mitigation opportunities on the back burner ready to go. The best approach to protect the core functions of unit livability, energy efficiency, long-term durability. You want to cut cosmetic features. So that's cutting some of the risk as well. Early sensitivity checks in the pro forma also help you plan some of those trade-offs. Metric and success. You want to take a look at leasing velocity, how fast units are rented, residential satisfaction, maintenance tickets, after stabilization. Once you're in there, you get stabilized. You want to track rent burden outcomes, the turnover. Are people coming in and out? Maintenance tickets, resident satisfaction. These metrics are going to show whether the project is meeting the community and the financial goals. And if they're not, you can definitely take an opportunity to address that. That's why we track metrics. Okay, so the case exercise. Jen or Hope, can one of you pop the sample data into the chat, just in case somebody did not get that case exercise? All right, so I am going to stop sharing because I can't see anybody and I feel disoriented. All right, so for our case study, if hopefully everybody has access to that. All right, so the first question that we have, step one, going back through our slides, who should this project serve? So our sample data for our Riverton, and oddly reminiscent of Madawaska, if anybody noticed that in the sample. Let's see, healthcare workers, teachers, manufacturing employees, and seniors downsizing. So that's who we're looking at serving. We also want to address new families who want affordable rentals. We're looking at, as far as the AMI bands, the area medium income bands, we're looking at 60% for most of the units. And that's typically 47,000 for family of three, 80% for moderate earners, and a few of the 50% AMI units for entry-level workers. So in Riverton, workforce families at 60% represent the largest unmet demand. With that, rents between $850 and $1,050 fit their wages.
So,
Small
Kristen, I'm
share
going to interrupt just for a second. I
Yeah.
just pasted the actual text from the case study into the chat so that people can
Okay.
grab it there.
Perfect. All right. So these are all of our, there we go. Okay, perfect. So with that bit of data that we have, right? So as we're starting to go through and take a look at who we have here, we want to figure out how to mix that 24 new rental unit, right? So once again, we've got a small share of 80% for teachers, law enforcement, but the majority are those workforce families. What we want to do is we want to support school enrollment, stability, workforce retention. We're going to take a look at what those leases look like within 6 months, maintain that 90%, and of course, track resident satisfaction. So based on, and of course, you see all the information there, but with our target households or the majority of our households being workforce families and then teachers, law enforcement, and the new workers at the bottom, do we feel that rentals or ownerships are our primary goal for this particular community? So for these purposes, we're going to look at more rentals. So with that, are we looking at more 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, or studios? Remember, the majority of our families in this community are workforce families.
So probably majority would be 2 bedrooms.
That's what I was going to say.
Right. Yeah. Nope, definitely. All right. So moving right on down in our case study there, how should we, excuse me, should we look at modular, stick-built, or adaptive reuse? Do we have a preference on that here? We're in northern Maine, we're in a valley area. We want to do a lot of 2-bedroom plus, so workforce families, with a slightly less mix for teachers or law enforcement or workers entering the workforce. Do we feel modular site built or rehabs or adaptive reuse are an option here for this community?
So I haven't gotten through all of the information yet,
Yep.
but you have 2 acres from the lumber yard. Obviously, I don't know specifics to it. I'm familiar with Madawaska, but not Riverton. So
You can use that. It'll be fine.
So the lumber yard, it may not work, but it'd be a reuse of the building potentially. Maybe adding on to it would work. The efficiency part, having a code background, the efficiency part may require extra work in comparison to a new built or a new stick built or a modular design. just because you never know what you're going to uncover when you tear down some sheetrock, what horrors of the past were there. So I guess that's it for that question.
Sure. So if we're looking at the adaptive reuse of a building, and keep in mind, my speaker is not great, so I may have misheard something that you said. So if we're looking at adaptive reuse of a building that's located at a lumberyard, so do we see that more for families, or do we see that more for like workforce housing, new workers entering the workforce in the community? How do we feel about that?
I'd say target them all. You got 24 units. At least according to this, we're looking for 24 units. So providing that we can put 24 units on there, majority of them are like, if you're aiming for some 2 bedrooms, majority of them would be 2 bedroom, but you may a small batch for 3. So it might look like 24 altogether. So you might look at like 8 1-bedroom,
Yep.
16 2 bedrooms, and that gets us to 24. So maybe cut out a few 1-bedrooms and put in some 3 bedrooms. That way, if you have like a larger family moving in, there's availability, but at the same time, you're also potentially attracting or retaining somebody that isn't looking or doesn't need, I don't necessarily want to say entry level, but like entry level into the hospital, for example. They could potentially afford the 850, but they don't need 2 bedrooms. So
Right.
that's where like a mix, I think, is going to be to target all of the components of the people. I think a mix is going to be. Now, again, you may want to focus on 2 bedrooms because that's kind of the goal. So, maybe 16 2 bedrooms and then 4 and 4 for the other 2. So
How does this change? And this is not part of the case exercise here, but how does that change if we're looking at a community that has had a dramatic outmigration of families and youth? Would that change whether we're concentrating on 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, for example?
I don't, at least in my opinion, potentially. And the reason I say that is because, and I mean, I would see less people staying because of housing, which this is one of those metrics that's hard. We have 400, according to the data, we have 400 people that commute in. How many of those might be locals that couldn't find housing in the area? Because if they're not, in the event that they're people that were never from Riverton, they always lived in the neighboring town and they just come to work at the manufacturing or whatever. But if you have a ton of younger people, especially that are leaving the area because they can't find housing, then again, you may want to change your like mix to address that.
And once again, still not, this part isn't involved in this either, but if we are looking at that, if we're going down the train of adjusting for outmigration, are we targeting, like, how do we target families to come in? Just curious, like, just if we know that we have outmigration and we adjust our mix here from 4 3 bedrooms to 5 or 7 3 bedrooms, because we need more families, we need more kids. How do we target? How do we figure out how to do that? It's just kind of like a food for thought, right? How do we get those people in? Is it through creating new jobs? Is it through infrastructure upgrades and broadband to bring in families that value work from home? I don't know, just kind of sorry, I went off a completely different track there, but
No, but
kind of,
I was
it's a
just gonna
rabbit
pop.
hole.
This is Debbie. I was going to pop in and say something anyway. Is that you can't. It's not a build it and they will come scenario, in my personal opinion. It is, and that's where I see this conversation all the time. You don't just start with just because you have, oh, I'm going to plop a good housing project. Now people are going to flock to it. No, it's got to be a holistic approach. Community development is place-based. It is what is making your community attractive or unattractive. Why are people leaving? Who's leaving and why did they leave? And this is a national, I just came back from a national conference. Every single state in the country is going, oh, our young people are leaving. That's because young people like to leave and go experience something different, and they might come back. What you've got to do is forget the fact that they might be leaving Riverton, she said with air quotes, and going to Bangor or Portland or Boston. But the people in Massachusetts are doing the same thing. They're going someplace else because they want to experience something else. You got to look at why they're leaving, and look at your community. And your community does it have, again, this is the place-based placemaking and all of that. What are the things about your community that are attractive? Are there jobs? What kind of jobs are there? You can, and if it's not conducive to if you don't have any employment opportunities, there you go. All right, how do we attract? And what about our community is missing that? Why isn't somebody expanding their business? What can you do to get them to expand their business? Or is it just something as simple as, we might not be able to attract anybody because of geographic constraints. What is it that makes your community attractive to people who want to live there? Is it outdoor recreation? Do people want to come? And like you said, broadband, I think all of the connectivity things are huge. I don't care who it is, they want it. It's good. That is all good. And that's that's a statewide issue. And the other thing, I was going to ask a question real quick, and sorry, if you guys know me, I tend to go on and then so I've hijacked a whole conversation. But I'm old and I don't care. So question being, so why are you targeting the 60% AMI? Question on that, because if you are, those technically at that income level, they have to have a subsidy. And those subsidies, there are wait lists for housing vouchers, Section 8 vouchers. So those require a subsidy in your capital stack. Is there subsidy built in? Because you just can't create subsidy. It's just not there, especially in this environment. So you've got to build it in that somehow with the way you're funding it, that an exterior subsidy is not necessary, because the people with portable vouchers are few and far between. Those are like gold mine to people because then they can go anywhere they want. But I got to tell you that I wouldn't base a business model on creating housing units expecting to get somebody with a Section 8 housing voucher. But that I'm just questioning. There's a lot of housing out there being created for people in that income limit. But if you target it and limit it, or you're just making it affordable to them, and then if somebody takes the rent that's higher than that, so be it. But I just wondered why that 60% was a target.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right about the wait list. So for this purpose in the case study, we just estimated like an 18-month wait list for both housing and for affordable housing specifically here. But in real life, I mean, at this point, those wait lists can be much longer, depending on the community that we're in with the, like I said, access to those subsidies. But yeah, so I know that didn't fully answer like the question, but that's just where just the data that we put in here. But you're right, and once again, if we're looking back to, Tim, go ahead. Did you have another?
So, and to answer your question from before, at least from my thought, we do need to look at a bigger picture, because looking at, we can't attract somebody if to a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom unit, doesn't matter, if we can't give them a job. Like, there's no reason to move here if there's nothing to come to. On the same side, you can't attract somebody at the local for the local workforce if there's no place to live. And I say that in a general sense because being from Aroostook County, we don't like to travel. Like a lot of people don't like to travel. I don't want to drive 15 minutes to get to work. It's a weird thing. But outside of here, people will drive hours to get to work. So um, the other thing is, well, I guess that's it for that one.
So I'm going to jump in just for a second before we kind of get too much further on. And this is just a case study, so it's not the actual for everything that's going on everywhere. I totally agree with you, Deb, that we found years ago that it's totally normal for people to want to leave home when they grow up. When they get to the point that they're old enough to do that. Where we fall down in the rural areas in Maine is we're not attracting other people's young people here to fill in the gaps that our young people leaving are producing. But the hope is that you can make sure that once they start their own families, they'll come back. Give them a reason to come back home. That's kind of what we have tried to work for a number of years. But Jim Fisher had put in the chat that in Deer Isle, they underestimated the demand for one-bedroom apartments. So that's something else to keep in mind too.
So since Jim mentioned that, I did see that. Thank you, Jim, for bringing that back up. What did you guys do, or what are you guys doing over in Deer Isle to mitigate that?
Hi there. I guess I'm on now. This isn't really my initiative. We have an island workforce housing group, which is a nonprofit, and they built 10 units, very energy efficient duplexes. I think what they found was that the workforce, a lot of the people who want to rent them are school teachers who are moving in who don't have children, and they just wanted one bedroom. They wanted to keep rents down. As we get children involved, people really want a house here. That they're not used to the idea of a 3-bedroom apartment with kids and stuff. That at that point they want their own single-family dwelling. And I don't know if that pattern will play out in the long run. We're about to embark on some apartments down in Stonington, and we'll see how that goes. But at least some of the younger workers who are moving in don't have children and they don't want 2 bedrooms at this point.
I think, Jim, that's a good point. And I think that's the other thing is that you've got to look at what is the workforce what's causing the housing shortage? Who's there that wants the housing? And what type of housing do they want? You've take a look at who's already in your community that says they don't have housing, and who are those people. It is vastly different in southern Maine than it is than northern and down east Maine. It's
Yeah.
like, again, I don't care what anybody says, we are more than a state. We are about 5 different states. And it's vastly different within 20 or 30 miles of a circumstance. So
Yeah,
who's looking for the housing, and where are they working?
I think that's a good point. I'll say in Deer Isle, a lot of the families with children are fishermen, and apartments won't work for them. They've got gear and traps, and they just need more space. And so that's a group that hasn't really, apartments don't work for them.
I agree. I live in Harpswell, same issue.
So I know that we don't have, Jen.
Sorry, I was just going to say that one of the things that we found in Washington County too is that a lot of our older citizens who would like to downsize and get into something smaller so that the 3 or 4 bedroom house they've lived in for years could be available for a family now that it's an older person living alone. But they can't find a smaller place to move into, so it doesn't make that larger place available. So sometimes it's coming at it from the other end. Can we make more places for fishermen that have a yard, a place for gear, a garage, whatever, available by ensuring that we've got suitable housing for seniors?
Thank
And
you
then I'll
for
just
that.
ratchet that up one more minute, is that, and then when that senior who wants to downsize but doesn't want to go into apartment, when there is a lot of senior housing out there. So when a senior, define senior, I don't know, 70, that now is a senior to me. But in 2 years it will not. I'll call it 80. So they're not ready to go into a senior housing complex, even though they could. I'm not talking assisted living. I'm just talking a age restricted unit. They don't want to, but they want a smaller place to live. But then in 2 to 5 years, they need to go into a senior complex. So if they're taking up that middle small entry level unit instead of going right to the senior thing, and so I personally see a big need, and it's happening though for senior facilities that are attractive to the younger senior, if you will, because you're right, they want to downsize. And the other thing is that big house, because they're, you know what it is, it looks like in rural Maine, a lot of these houses are big and they're not well maintained, so they need renovation. So for that young family to move in, it needs to be renovated. So it's this purchase plus improvement program type thing that is, out, that really is a necessity, because those houses are big and they cost a lot to renovate to get to today's standard. And I was just going to say one more thing real quick. I was looking in your capital stack stuff. Just keep in mind, and I always do this because whenever I have an opportunity to remind people, if you're talking CDBG for any kind of infrastructure and it relates to housing, you must have your housing funding all done, ready to go, because we will not fund infrastructure to nowhere, or infrastructure to, I hope it comes. And we haven't done that for years. And way back, we looked like geniuses at this project that never happened in the Augusta area. They were hell bent on getting infrastructure to us. And we're like, no, we don't know that house is never going to be built. And guess what? It never got built. So just be mindful of that.
Thank you for that. So what I'm hearing, Deb, is almost like a unofficial transitional housing for kind of that middle level senior looking to downsize, but not quite ready to go into the retirement community or assisted
Well,
living.
you know what it is? I'm a fan of build a unit. I think we've gotten so compartmentalized. I can't even say that. Is that a word? Compartmental. I don't know. We've all gotten so siloed in our, well, it's going to be this and it's going to be that. No, build a unit, make it affordable to people somewhere in that 80% to 100%, whatever, in the best way you can. And then whoever takes the unit takes the unit. That's a new unit is a new unit is a new unit. And eventually, we will get to that supply demand middle and things will start leveling off. But that's not how the funding always works. I mean, my money, when you use it again in very restricted ways, because whatever it is, because of the rental situation, it can be only 51% of units are below 80. The rest could be market. That's my favorite type of rental project. You have market rate and then a few units that are income restricted. But any type of unit that's built, that's why people, when they talk about, oh, they're doing luxury condos, great. It's a unit. It's a unit in the market. So I've been having that conversation over and over again with people, like, let's stop worrying about the different, segments of it and go, any unit anywhere is good. And especially smaller little, what they did in Madison and Jim, I saw that thing on the news about the new units that got built, but in Madison, they did those duplexes and they were modular. I think they're modular, and they did like 4 of them or something. And they didn't use anybody's subsidy. They just did it on their own, but it was a private developer. But there again, what a great little plop a duplex somewhere on donated land, or, in the middle of town where something, was a vacant lot. What a great way to just do a little small project. One at a time.
Deb, thank you so much for that. We love it when you come in here. You are a wealth of knowledge. So we appreciate you so much. So I will say, though, in the interest of time, because I know it is 9:31, so we've provided the collateral and the materials for today's class. And I encourage you to take a look at those on your own, work through the worksheets, maybe take some of those ideas back to your community. And as we're ending this, and if anybody wants to stay on for additional comments, that's great. But, I guess the biggest thing that I wanted you as community developers or, any interested party to walk away from is to be intentional. Be intentional with what your community needs. The tools that we've shared with you, once again, those are high views, but they're a good place to start in giving you an idea of what needs to be worked on. Like Deb said, you're not going to build a road to nowhere, right? And so just be intentional. Take that with you, please. I want to thank everybody for bearing with me. Once again, I am not a facilitator of classes per se, so I appreciate you sticking in with me here. But yeah, if I apologize for not being able to get through the entire case study, but once again, you have the information there. Does anybody have any questions or closing comments?
One other thing, and people want to go, they can. In your implementation notes, you had community engagement, employer partnerships, and local info sessions to pre-release units. I read it wrong a few minutes ago, but it reminded me of what we did. We had a local employer that has well-paying job, science and engineer jobs, that were telling us that they want a subdivision, similar to other ones here in the area. So we surveyed them. We sent surveys, specifically a housing survey, to them. They sent it out to their employees, and we got back some contradicting data. It didn't make sense. We went through the 18 pieces that we got back, and that's when I realized that we surveyed the 23 employees that are currently there, that are currently living here, and don't have any idea if they'll be here in 5 years. Not the people that they are hoping to attract. So in that case, like if you do survey, be mindful of who the survey is actually going to capture versus, like, our intent was to capture the people they want to attract and bring to the area. And in turn, we surveyed the people that already live here. So it was just an interesting tidbit that I came across a couple weeks ago.
Good to know. Are you or anybody working with and I may have missed part of this. Once again, my speakers are not great right now. Aristic Partnership is currently working to identify different demographics of people to recruit to the county. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. Have you touched base with Kristen, for example, to see if they're doing any surveying?
Not specifically on that, because I didn't know that they were. I mean, I know that's one of their missions, one of their goals, in general, but I didn't know they were actively working towards something at the moment. On other pieces, between the housing summit that they're doing and the housing summit that we're working on for next spring, I will reach out. I will be talking quite a bit, I have a feeling, so I'll reach out and we'll have a conversation about that.
Yeah, I would recommend that. Kristen is doing a lot of work in a lot of spaces, really, but yeah, that would be great, I think, to have that connection with her. So once again, I mean, if you don't want to stick around, you don't have to, but I do have a question, and I don't want to disagree with Deb, but how do we feel, for those of you interested in having this discussion, how do we feel about a build it and they will come situation? Is that feasible with the right follow through and recruitment? Or does build it and they will come just not work? Like, Jim mentioned they have the 1 bedrooms that they were anticipating and that just didn't work. Like, just out of curiosity, what are your thoughts on that?
So I welcome disagreement. You feel free to disagree. The only thing I caution is because if you use certain federal funding types or some kind of funding, you've got an occupancy requirement. you know, if you haven't met like in my world, if you don't have bodies in those units, you owe the money back. So it's all depends on your funding stream and what the requirements are. If you've got the luxury of very patient occupancy, and what does that do to your debt service? If you don't have occupants on a timely manner, who's funding the continued operation and maintenance of that building? Just that's the risk there. If you don't have quick occupancy or know that you're going to have a pretty good demand for it, right? Which, like, again, pre-selling, you can take, you know, interested parties. I mean, a lot of the units that I've seen that we've been participating in, they've had a list of people that want to move in it from the day they announced the construction of it. So if, you know, a lot of that pre-community work, who is there a demand? Get your name on a list. Doesn't mean they're going, but you could say, oh, if we're going to do the 24 units in Riverton and you've got 40 people who say they like to live there, that's good indication. But just be careful for some of your funding stream, or if it doesn't get built, I mean, occupied quickly, how do you maintain it? How do you pay for it?
Right. And on the flip side of that, I guess not flip side, but to mitigate that, I would assume that would fall to an active developer or active community to go out and recruit in advance. Like you said, you know, look at the waiting list. Like if we just build it and we don't do anything to let people know it's there, I could definitely see where that could become an issue, you know. But I think if somebody has ownership over actively filling those, sharing the information, and actively filling those units, I think that could be a good thing there. But yeah, you're right. If we're not doing anything with it, if we're just building it, I could see where that's an issue with those funding sources in particular. So thank you for that.
So a couple of thoughts on that. One, we have a brand new finished just a couple months ago, 18 units here in the city. They had waiting list for months and months. Because the project drug on, the waiting list quit waiting and went and found apartments or homes or whatever, wherever. And now we have, I think there's 16 units currently vacant. They've been open for a month and a half. Like that's where we're at. It's a weird situation because I hear a lot of people say they can't find apartments. In part, I think the pricing on those apartments is a little to be desired. They're looking at like $1,250 for like a single bedroom, and I think it's upwards of 15 and change for a 2-bedroom.
Where is that? Where is that?
It's here in Presque Isle, Elm Street
Presque Isle?
Estates, or yeah.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it just the project should have been finished last fall. So it's extended by 8-10 months. And I think they ran into it. I don't know the LLC. It's Dwayne Gagne is the actual owner though.
But it's private?
Yeah, it's not, we're not putting it on.
No, but I
Like,
mean,
the
it's
city
private.
didn't have.
Do you know if they had any federal funding in it, like, or Maine housing funding, or?
I think they went through Maine housing for part of it. And I think there's a CBDG for some infrastructure on it. Don't quote me on that because a lot of that stuff, the stack piece of it was, well, the stack piece of it was done before I became the development person. It was done previously. So I thought they had gotten some sort of grant.
Oh,
maybe
you know
it wasn't CBDG.
What's it called? Elm Street? I'll look it up.
Yeah, Elm Street Estates is what they're calling it now. So the other piece, in my world, some of the funding, and good, bad, or indifferent, I don't know. So the build it and they will come piece, I think in certain situations might be doable. And again, it depends on the situation. So one of the things that we're looking at is the company was looking for a subdivision. I have a parcel of land that is not very far out of town, but feels like it's 10 miles out. So very rural, which again was what our survey data is saying. So it needs a subdivision, but I can't guarantee occupancy rate, but I need to extend the infrastructure to increase the density to some degree. Like, I don't want to increase it a lot because again, the survey data said that they're looking for a rural feel or a suburban type feel. This is probably a perfect parcel for it. But if I can't, um, if I can't get the infrastructure to it, which it's probably $1 million, I think would land me fairly close to the middle of the property. Which $1 million isn't a lot nowadays, but if I can't get it, then the development dies almost instantly. Either that or we're gonna reduce the density because now we have to look at putting water and septic on the properties. And maybe preventative to the density piece. So unfortunately, like the funding pieces of CBDG, like for infrastructure or whatever the federal fundings, which I can completely agree with not building things to nowhere because it is our taxpayer dollars, and I want to see them go to like good use. So it's hard to like pick a side on that, but just a couple of thoughts.
Well, if you already have a apartment sitting there vacant, that's are they all vacant, those Elm Street apartments? Not one of them is occupied?
No, I think one or two are occupied currently. And I mean, that was information from a couple weeks ago, so it could be more than that. But I don't know. Like we don't follow their occupancy rate. The only reason I had that information is because my code officer is actually was looking for an apartment and he looked into that one because they had vacancy.
Well, thanks everyone, unless there's something else that, anybody else have any burning thoughts to add to the mix?
Awesome. Thank you all so much. We appreciate your attendance today. Tim, Jim, great feedback. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you guys in future classes. I promise I will not be teaching those, so they should go more smoothly. Once again, I appreciate every one of you, and please feel free to reach out with any additional questions.
Kristen,
And
thank you
Thanks,
for
Kristen.
taking the time to talk about this.
And join us on Friday if you're interested in participating in either the MCDA annual meeting or the Zero Energy Home Tour or both. So thank you very much, Kristen.
Thank you.